Supervisors, staff, and guests, would you please do your roll call? Mike, would you confirm, please? There we go. Everybody here. We have 17. We'll continue on. With the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like you to please stop for a minute of honor for our I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Alice, this is Mary. I'm here.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. We have the agenda. I have a motion by Supervisor Baraboo and a second by Supervisor Booty. Please vote your ballot.
Supervisor Schwallen.
And we have 17 yes, 0 nay, 4 absent. We have a majority vote to continue on. You have the minutes of the 11/1/21 and 11/16/21, our special meeting. I need a motion. Stillman. Please vote your ballot.
Just wait.
Wait. Okay.
Emily, can you sign in? Yes. Okay. Now they can.
Now you may vote.
And Supervisor Schwallenberg, how do you vote?
Hello?
Supervisor Schwallenberg, how do you vote?
Yes. You have it.
Zero nay, 3 absent. Moving on, are there any petitions?
There are no petitions.
Any communications?
I have no communication.
All right, then we'll move on to special business. And we will start with the update and report of the Calumet County's U.S. EPA Community along with Harris Byers.
Good morning. Thank you for your attention today. We are going to give you hopefully a succinct project. So this project goes back to 2018. Okay, thank you. This project goes for some consultant to write a grant and administer it because we had been told that it would take several years of trying to get a grant from the EPA to RFQ, we hired Stantec, and so Harris Byers, who I'll introduce shortly, became our consultant at the end of 2018. Because we had succeeded. So the rest is what we're going to be talking about. The rest is history. So here. So first, just take a step back. What is a brownfield? Brownfields are real property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence of hazards or potential presence of hazardous substances, pollutants, or contaminants. So a lot of places we pass in our lives on a daily basis. They can be former auto repair shops, old warehouses, sites, former dry cleaners. They can be former supermarkets, vacant land, abandoned rail yards, or other abandoned utilities. Plants, etc. This is just 12 examples of what a brownfield could be like. And in fact, if you've heard in the media recently, former Darboy Club, if you've either looked at my newsletter or heard in the media lately, the former Darboy Club is being demolished, and they had to deal with asbestos. Was a bit of a reason why it was a little difficult to acquire that site and why there was some hesitation, because there was a perception, which ended up being accurate, that there were could have helped that project, but we did not have adequate money left, so the timing didn't work out for them. So why do we have this? Why does EPA have grant funding to private sector hesitates? They're abandoned buildings usually, or abandoned property, as I just showed in the examples, that has some kind of glitch, some kind of hiccup to it, and people are hesitant to get involved. Which is a clean, fresh site, than it is a brownfield site, which either has real or perception of contamination. So I am going to turn the presentation over to Harris, but basically, allowed the county to do a number of things that Harris is going to share with you in terms of this project. Demand for the funding. We have subsequently applied for another $500,000 grant, which we are hoping we will receive in that. Introduce Harris Byers. He has been our consultant working with a number of our staff in the county. He is a senior Brownfields project manager, and he is going.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you for this opportunity to come and talk about something that really I'm super passionate about. And it's about helping units of government, local communities, recycle land. And the reason The reason I'm showing you the title of this website from EPA is so you kind of have an understanding about why a federal government has any interest. Back to 1995, the EPA had this little pilot project. What if we as a federal government can give units of government within the U.S. small little pilot pots of money to allow them to work with private property owners, developers, to kind of get over some of the heavy cost associated with buying . business owner, or maybe you know a small business owner, one of the most difficult things that you do during your operation is buying property, finding a place to be. So EPA said, well, if we can put some money into this, then these kind of vacant little gas station here, dry cleaner there, get redeveloped back on the tax roll and become really an asset to the community. Really got going under the second Bush administration, 2002, reauthorized under the BUILD Act. So it's been hugely popular across a multitude of executives. The first one gives you an idea of how many sites have been worked on, but most interestingly, look at the amount of leverage. So to date, EPA has granted about $1.25 billion, say, dollars to communities across. It's one of the most successful federal programs out there in terms of generating a return. And it's partially due to the way the program operates and communities like Calumet County that take these grant dollars. The tasks of your particular grant kind of follow the way a project would unfold if you were to county. Secondly, it's to do phase ones. Phase one environmental site assessments are investigations that a consulting firm would do if you're interested in buying a property. It's sort of a paper search. What are the potential risks that you as a property owner may encounter in your acquisition? Finally, the third task that was worked on is referred to as a phase two environmental site assessment. That's when we're sampling soil and we're sampling groundwater to try to figure out, are those risks real? And if so, what are they, where are they, and how do we clean them up in the context of property acquisition and reuse? On the right-hand Calumet County was used in sampling soil and groundwater to try to move these projects forward. And I'm going to give you a couple of case studies. Exciting projects that the county accomplished was in digitizing and georeferencing sandborne maps. So, for a pause a moment, the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company started in the late 19th century. The objective of this company was to issue insurance policies to private property owners. And in order for the insurance company to know extraordinarily highly detailed drawings and maps of individual pieces of land in larger communities across the U.S., again, starting in the late 19th century up through about 1965. And so this gives us some snapshots of what features were on particular pieces of property that, most importantly, posed a fire hazard. And so for us in the environmental world, we look at this and say, what a treasure trove of knowing where the old tanks 1925 of Chilton. There's Main Street, you've got the Manitowoc River to the north and the railroad. And one of the projects we worked on was Chilton Place. These sandborne maps in a GIS platform, we can kind of turn them off and turn them on and trace out where these old tanks used to be so that we know physically on this little piece of land that's kind of outlined in green early 20th century that may impact that property today. So having the sandborne map collection digitized and georeferenced to today's current street grid is extraordinarily powerful. To give you a sense then about how many brownfields there are in GIS, to give you a sense of what we were working with. And it's always been interesting, and I've worked with quite a number of communities in Wisconsin as well as across the U.S. On the left-hand side, these are census tracts of kind of potential brownfields. So there were several thousand brownfields that came up when these database searches. And the trick then became for Mary to figure out, how do I prioritize $300,000 when I've got take home was the sites that got assessed were those who had a potential purchaser or posed some risk to the community from a health base. 1 Quite a few sites, primarily along the Main Street corridor in Chilton. New Holstein, we were looking at the former Tecumseh site, but because of the other grant funding that came available, there was a better fit rather than the EPA grant. So again, Stantec worked on that, and it was a great success, as well as a project over in Stockbridge. Now I've highlighted a couple. Get out. What did the county get out of this grant? That's the number of reports on the right-hand side of the table that just popped up. So we did a lot of work, again, on drilling, collecting soil, collecting groundwater, and then helping a potential purchaser figure out, how do I now address these residual contamination concerns when I'm buying a piece of property? The first it's North 3503 on Wisconsin 55, kind of near Quinney, Stockbridge area. From the pictures that Mary showed you earlier, this is a textbook brownfield. This was what the site looked like the first day I saw it. It's a heavily weathered structure, and as it turns out, it was being used for metal plating. But what the county saw, proper management of hazardous waste just hadn't occurred. The quantity of flammables, cyanide, acids, bases, they were scattered throughout this whole structure. And had an emergency removal action. Because when you walk into a site and you see buckets of acid in Farm and Fleet and Menard's buckets stacked on top of each other, that's a real concern. Bottom right, large drums of acid with just plastic put over the top. The point being, the immediate risk the county had to sort of cross and manage was the threat to human health. That's when the guys in the moon suits show up. That's when you have folks in Tyvek suits coming in and dealing with this hazardous waste. So
I want to stop and interject for a little second. In case you didn't recognize the N3503, Highway 55, the county owns that property. We acquired it. That is our property, and we really did not know that that's what we were acquiring when we got it.
But you didn't really have an alternative option, right? I mean, the pictures I just showed you are things that in my field, in engineering, we look at as huge. In their removal action. They took out 11 tons of hazardous waste out of a building that was no bigger than maybe your typical house, which was tremendous. Of the tasks on projects that otherwise would have just sat there and sat there and sat there until one day the drums ruptured, and then you have some of this waste ending up into your drinking water aquifer, which would, again, the county had no choice. Now this is where the EPA grant comes in. Because the county, again, had these grant funds, we were able to come in and start looking at the structure itself, the places where this waste used to be stored, to go around and quantify the asbestos, map it out so we knew how to get rid of it prior to demolishing the structures. And interestingly, if you've heard this either rumor or pictures of it, for half a pause, when I gave this talk earlier up toward that part of the county, they were like, yeah, we've heard rumors about buried rail cars. And after the war, steel was extremely rare. And certainly purpose-built underground storage tanks were even more rare. And so it made perfect sense in the 1940s to just bury a railroad. And so anyway, with our EPA grant, we were able to get it out of the ground because, again, it was not purposely built for a tank. It's got rivets, which are obviously not great for holding back fuel oil. And with a separate grant that the county was able to receive, we're able to take care of the asbestos and then demolish the structure. So if you've driven by last kind of fall and you were in groundwater, beneath the building, across the site, to figure out where the liabilities are and how do we now address them and plan for reuse. So again, that a project that really did pose a huge risk to human health, and then going through the steps with the grant funding and layering on state funding and federal funding. The second story is one that has a slightly different reorient yourself. Here's Main Street. This is in Chilton, the railroad tracks, and then the Manitowoc River. Manitowoc River hasn't always been where it is today. So if you look at the area kind of outlined in sort of a purple color, this was the Manitowoc River in 1937. That's 1898. So immediately the takeaway from this is you see the current building was constructed over the top of a historic riverbed. And so it probably doesn't surprise you when I tell you that this building has got some pretty significant water infiltration issues. The basement's wet. There's almost a stream of water running through the basement. And so when the building was constructed, and again, for those who So when the building was constructed, they constructed it with very large sump pumps and sump crocks to kind of mitigate this water infiltration issue. I want to build out my business. There were quite a few issues that the county, using this grant, was able to sort of quantify and confirm. Some of the big ones being, now you've got this sump crock system that's discharging into the Manitowoc River without a permit from the state. Sludge and residues and stuff they left behind on the floor. So now you've got water running across this sludge that's got PCBs in it, going into a sump crock that's being pumped into the river. That equation is an equation that just can't happen. And so that, amongst a few other things, were identified. Have an industrial user who wants to build their business. And DNR looked at the data and said, you know what? It's not the responsibility of the current owner. The current owner had nothing to do with the way this building was constructed or the county's grant to go after what's referred to as the financially responsible party. So if you've seen drill rigs out there, if you've seen people sampling, it's because Newell Rubbermaid, who, remember, bought Miro years ago, Newell Rubbermaid is now having to pay for the investigation and the eventual cleanup on sitting in a kind of not best use. The county was able to put some seed money into it, quantify some of the risks. The Department of Natural Resources then said, former operator, former manufacturer, that I think is really great. It's a fantastic outcome, again, because it's not the public that's on the dole for cleaning the site up. Last case study is a site in Brillion. It's kind of at the corner of Water Street. Interesting success story here is that a small business administration to back her loan to acquire the business and to build it out. Well, this SBA requires some investigation to confirm whether or not the potential risks that we had identified. A lot of money, but some seed money went into sampling soil and sampling groundwater. And once we were able to sort of quantify that there were no risks, the SBA backed the loan. So thank you. I think, you know, it's been really exciting to work in Calumet County because I think you're a fantastic steward of federal resources, and I'm optimistic that your next
questions. All right, we have a question by
how this all came about goes back, over 20 years ago when the county took over a cheese factory. Bar supplies and all kinds of different stuff. And it was full of chemicals and raccoons and everything else. And at that time, we were told that it was bad, so we went out there and looked, and it was. But that's when the county board members, property before the county takes it over, which wasn't done before that. They just took it over. Was going on, how these people were coming in and tearing it down. Two came in with suits, the other one was ahead of them. And things were going on that wasn't supposed to be. I ended up going down to the state and testifying. They asked me to come down. And the people were all listening, and I wasn't good to the DNR. And so a lot was all being done. It was very interesting, and it was saddening that all this people just leave stuff. So, thank you.
All right. Supervisor Diedrich?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question that you've had up to this point. I would expect that registered or witnessed in the application for more, and it's clearly you showed terrific results with that. I thank you for your involvement, both of you, and your teams. Thank you much.
Supervisor Shu?
My question is, what do you do with the stuff that you're
It's a fantastic question. The goal on a reuse site, let's just pick a material has to be removed. Can some material remain in place? Maybe the less contaminated material. Marilyn, you have, I'm sorry, Supervisor, you have a fund. And I have a licensed landfill that's constructed to mitigate leaching and that sort of thing. If I can take the contamination from a site where it's leaching into your groundwater table, dig up that contamination, then that waste that I've moved is being these small sites where, say for example, the plating site, where all this waste could have just at any given time spilled directly into your bedrock aquifer and put to it. In a lot of cases we recycle some of the waste. We'll send it back through a reclamation process. If it's petroleum, we'll try to recycle it. The metals, clean it up in place. So dry cleaners are a great use of some chemical oxidants to try to, again, not to take stuff away, but to fix what's there. Use, right?
Supervisor Irwin?
Well, all I want comments. I don't think we should leave here without recognizing both Mary Kohrell project in New Holstein. It was a major project. I considered it was. I think Supervisor Dre, he lives right behind it. I live a block and a half away, and we lived with that for a long time. Stantec team has done to make this. It's gone.
Is there a business now called Chilton Plating, or is it? Am I kind of confused about that? Or
to it as
Yeah.
so about the 400 block of Main Street, kind of between Main Street and the river.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, but what's? Isn't there a plating company, or is that in Brillion now? What I'm thinking of.
So it no longer exists, and I don't, so that is probably what you're thinking of. There isn't a Brillion Plating. There's I
think that's what I was thinking of.
probably.
So. Okay.
Presentation was very interesting. Okay. Moving on, we're going to hear what's happening with our IT information system. And Matt, are you going to start out? Thank you. Were you?
Good morning. So what John and I wanted to do this morning, on kind of the how and why that team was created, and start in with some of the projects that the team's been involved with, and then John will kind of and how they will be put to use and in the future, and how they're being put to use now. So back in foreseen passing of the previous IT director, Howard, the county decided to kind of review the IT environment within Calumet County. So on December of 2019, the county retained Clifton, Larson, and Allen to do a look into how they were doing. So as part of that, that review, CLA interviewed 16 up an IT profile, what the department saw in the IT department under its current structure, and maybe identify some areas that for potential. CLA concluded that the IT department was staffed with very competent and energetic employees, but also noted that really didn't really communicate between departments on our IT infrastructure and our IT needs. That was hindering the IT's for redundancies, and it created redundancies throughout the county, and also was really hindering the IT's department so those silos were really kind of hindering the process in the IT environment and the ability to create a robust IT environment for Calumet County. So in order to individual recommendation the end of 2020 and into 2021 with key members from different departments with a charter. So, and then really that charter identified and ratified that the team wasn't there to administer day-to-day operations or administer the IT department, So the first thing that was created was the IT steering team, then the charter on how they would operate it, and then we got into the nuts. Was the critical system inventory. That is included in your packet. And then there's also an IT questionnaire matrix. We'll talk a little bit about those tools coming up, but I want to start with the critical system. So that really was an attempt to identify what we have. If you're going to move that individual inventories were sent to each department. In larger departments, those inventories were broken out by division. Software and applications. So what software do you have? What's its application in your department? Is it critical to public health and safety? How often is it used? How many users are there? How much data loss can you be down before IT needs to respond? So out of that study, 285 systems were identified throughout the county. These systems considered backbone systems and systems that all other systems relied upon to operate. So a critical environment. If we don't have a network, we can't run software applications that all departments need to use. Phones were included on that. The E911 use. So that was the first, the mission critical. Then we had business critical. What is really critical to the business functions of Calumet? That are critical to public health and safety, systems that are critical to the county, and systems that are critical to the department. So there's a varying within the summary report, you can see a system listed as critical to public health and safety, but then it'll also be critical to a department. So let's say in planning and zoning, I would have viewed a system critical to public document imaging. They don't, their use, it's not critical to public health and safety, but it's critical to their department mission. And it's not about ranking systems as far as importance. It's really about identifying what's there and what that system means to county operations, public health and safety, and the mission. Down on the tools, the critical system inventory summary report, and the IT.
So first off, I guess I was really surprised that we actually had 280. That being said, not all of those 285 systems are fully supported by IT. Some of them are just state-based systems that they rely on our critical systems inventory. I think one of the biggest things to come out of that is that we just didn't have a list. So other departments didn't know that, you know, another department already had some imaging in terms of, you know, the county, and ultimately that was human services. But it's just nice so that they can all see that report and collaborate together. So if they have to make, if we have to make a system-wide change, we know what department. Also, we realize that there's some duplicated services out there. So now, hopefully, probably have 4 or 5 different versions of PDF software out there. You know, not only does it cost more money, but it costs, we have to have our staff trained on all that. So we're going to try to standardize on about. It also helps us with our backup strategy and our retention. So we only have a certain amount of storage available for backups. This allows us to take those mission critical systems and make less critical systems are backed up less frequently. Also in the department we have the rest of the staff are relatively new. So this gives our staff, you know, a good look at what's actually out there. Helps them prioritize their they can look at that report and say, okay, which one, how do I prioritize? You know, from the inventory that we've got out. Do we have any questions, I guess, on the?
Guess they're all clear, John.
Okay. So as the questionnaire we sent out, Matt and I came up with 8 questions to send out to department.